I think one of the most disappointing aspects about the power scaling of One Punch Man is that most of the tension goes entirely to the scaling of One Punch Man, aka Saitama. Most of the focus goes to putting the caped Baldy up against the strongest opponents possible from other universes like Goku or Superman. But I think it's often forgotten that there is a massive cast of other characters in the story that all have their own unique power scaling entirely. Scaling that I think is honestly more dynamic and thus far more interesting to talk about than Saitama's scaling. So today, I'm going to be scaling the strongest heroes from the One Punch Man universe besides Saitama, the S-class heroes. If they were put up against Raditz, the first major opponent of Dragon Ball Z, and the man who was essentially the first to kill Goku, would they be able to come out on top and save the world? Or would they need to be carried by One Punch Man like they have been multiple times now? Let's find out. Also, spoiler warnings for the One Punch Man manga. If you like this kind of stuff, make sure to like, subscribe, and let's jump right in. Now, just like any other team of superheroes, the S-class heroes are not all created equal, with several getting far more attention, feats, and overall just objectively better scaling than others. Thankfully, there is an ordered ranking from 1 to 17 that, while not entirely based off of strength, does give us a general idea about who is stronger and who is weaker, with lower-end heroes like Tank Top Master tending to be at the bottom, with stronger heroes like Bang near to the top. For this video, we'll just assume that Raditz is essentially replacing Boros in this scenario, with all the S-class heroes being present for his arrival and jumping him all at once. However, we will be using feats from later on in the story, so we don't limit what they can do. Right off the bat, we need to firstly cover the scaling of the heroes that I simply don't think will be relevant in the fight against Raditz at all, either because they haven't done anything impressive, or because they are intentionally not very strong. The S-class heroes in this tier are Puri Puri Prisoner, Tank Top Master, Watchdog Man, Pig God, Zombie Man, and Child Emperor. Let's quickly cover why they're simply not built for this fight at all. As a nice baseline, we know that all of these heroes should at least be town level in attack potency, as they should be equal to or stronger than beginning of series Genos, who could create explosions with that range with his incineration cannons. Given that Genos, even later in the story while being much stronger, still struggled with demon level threats, it's safe to say that any S-class hero scales here, given that all S-class heroes should be able to solo a demon level monster by themselves, which we've seen happen multiple times. Still, rounding out the bottom of the list is Zombie Man, who is the physically weakest S-class hero. Zombie Man's main gimmick is that he can regenerate from most wounds, allowing him to simply outlast his opponents and defeat them. With this method, he was able to eventually outlast a simulation of Carnage Kabuto, a dragon level threat, and beat him. The main issue though is that if enough of his body is destroyed, Zombie Man will still die, and unfortunately one ki blast from Raditz would be enough to blast him into atoms, let alone mincemeat, which is stated sufficient to killing him. Next up are Tank Top Master and Puri Puri Prisoner. While both of these guys have certainly gotten stronger over the course of the series, they ultimately are guys with no unique powers who just punch and kick hard. While they are definitely stronger than Genos at the beginning of the story, they get slammed by some of the weakest versions of Garo that exist, and to this day, Puri Puri Prisoner considers himself the weakest of the S-class. The final three heroes in this tier at least have some good victories, but the main issue is that it's against monsters who don't really have anything impressive besides just being dragon level. There is a massive range in power between threat level tiers, so does Pig God and Child Emperor beating Phoenix Man and fighting Gums respectively mean they can scale to other dragon level monsters like Vaccine Man or Beefcake, who can output mountain busting levels of power? I'm not entirely sure, but if you think all S-class come up to this minimum level of power, be my guess. Regardless though, these guys are comparable to the likes of Mercenary Tao or Buff Master Roshi, who would do just as well against Raditz as either of them. Next, we enter the mid-tier S-class heroes. Darkshine, Atomic Samurai, and Drive Knight. These guys are all pretty clearly portrayed or outright stated to be more powerful than the heroes in the previous tier, while also being clearly inferior to heroes that we'll talk about later. You have Darkshine nearly one-shotting a stronger version of Garo, Atomic Samurai overpowering Homeless Emperor's energy blasts, and while his scaling is a bit vague, Drive Knight's fusion with Genos, at least to me, showed that the two were at least comparable in power at the time. Regardless, they should be reaching into that mountain and potentially country levels of power based off of the feats of comparable Dragon level and Monster Association cadres, especially for Atomic Samurai. These guys are all ultimately a victim of either getting directly power cliffed or not having showings against stronger opponents. Next, we have what could be considered the lower high tiers of the S-Class: Flashy Flash, Metal Bat, Genos, Metal Knight, Bang, and Tatsumaki. Metal Knight is an odd case where he's scaled entirely based off of implication. At one point, the Monster Association considered him among the top 4 strongest heroes, but he's never actually done anything, and usually when his robots do show up, they don't even stop a threat. Meanwhile, Flashy Flash, Metal Bat, and Bang all have fights with or alongside Garo that all end up with them being on the inferior or losing side. However, circumstances depending, they all at least are somewhat fractionally comparable to him at their peaks. This means they might be continent busting level in power, as Metal Bat and Garo together could combat Sage Centipede in his 666 leg grand drill, which is calculated to be continental level. Beyond all of this though is actually Genos, who when using his strongest form of 10-second mode could match and even overpower Psychos while fused with Orochi, whose beams could cut through the planet on a multi-continent level scale, and who scales above Monster King Orochi, who similarly could affect the Earth's core on a multi-continental scale. Finally, there's Tatsumaki, who was ultimately equal to, if not just stronger than, the same Psychos, essentially making her power on par with Genos, but without the 10-second time limit, while also having the far more potent telekinetic hacks as an Esper. How do these guys do against Raditz? Well, despite the massive jump in power, they are still nothing compared to the Saiyan. Even at the most massive lowball, if we say that Raditz's power level of 1500 makes him less than twice as strong as Goku's 910 power level moonbusting Kamehameha, this would still put him leagues above Tatsumaki's psychic attacks or Genos' strongest blasts. He'll probably just walk through them while maybe getting his armor a little bit singed. There's also the issue of speed that I haven't mentioned until now. Flashy Flash is considered one of, if not the fastest hero in the S-Class, and his best feats are only several times the speed of light, essentially hard capping the speed of everybody else. This is actually consistent as Tatsumaki is stated unable to throw things at the speed of light without making them disintegrate, meaning all attacks we see her do must be moving at relativistic speeds at best. Meanwhile, a Kid Goku at least 5 times weaker than Raditz was dodging light beam attacks with little issue. All hope is not lost for the S-Class heroes though, as there are still 2 more members I haven't talked about: King and Blast. King within the world of One Punch Man is considered to be essentially the strongest, but is actually a completely normal guy. However, through sheer aura farming, he's managed to make the world actually think he's super strong. Jokes aside, is there any way he can actually take Raditz? Unfortunately, probably not. As we've seen, Dragon Ball has its own version of King with Mr. Satan, and at least Mr. Satan is actually a little bit strong. However, everyone who can actually fight can see right through all of his boasting, and one look from the scouter could tell Raditz everything he needs to know about King and flick him like he did the farmer with a shotgun. Blast is actually what King is pretending to be, as he is far and away the strongest hero besides Saitama. Blast's main feat comes from being able to briefly fight against and even smack around awakened Garo, while also redirecting the serious punch clash between him and Saitama. This attack blew up an entire portion of the night sky, and even if Blast only scales to a tiny fraction of the powers here, he would still need to be at least star level or solar system level in power. Unfortunately for Raditz, there is really no way to get him to that level of power. Even using anime feats done by other Saiyans of the era like King Vegeta, these explosions don't reach that level, and there is an over 8,000 power level gap between Raditz and the King of all Saiyans. So unfortunately, Raditz would not be able to take on the S-Class all at once, entirely because they would get carried by Blast. Without him there though, he would be unironically one-shotting all of them. The best argument you can make for the S-Class without Blast is that Raditz does tend to hold back a little bit, as in the one major fight we see, he allowed 3 people far weaker than him to win because he played around too much. Either way, Blast puts up LeBron numbers to keep the Earth safe for another day, until in a year when even more Saiyans arrive. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and as always, thank you to my members who got to see this video early, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya!